I might be on the streets, but I always knew I had a better life than some. My kid's born with no home at all.
Oh, don't cry. It'll be okay. We'll take you someplace nice and warm.
Where you going? The cop shop's that way.
This bundle of joy is a Christmas present sent from God! She's our baby now!
It's a special presentation of Falling with Style. I'm Doug.
And I'm Derek.
And typically, each episode of this ongoing Pixar movie marathon podcast is dedicated to exactly one movie in the Pixar Animation Studios canon. But for the next couple months, we're covering movies and maybe even a bit of television made by other studios, each of which includes clear, unafraid, and unambiguous depictions of queerness. For more information on why we're breaking formula, check out our short special presentation introduction. This episode, we're talking about Tokyo Godfathers. Tokyo Godfathers is a Madhouse production. It was distributed by Sony Pictures and has since been restored, redubbed in English, and re-released in 2020 by GKIDS and Destination Films. Tokyo Godfathers was written and directed by Satoshi Kon. Keiko Nobumoto was his screenwriting partner, and it was produced by Shinichi Kobayashi, Masao Takayama, and Taro Maki. Tokyo Godfathers premiered at Big Apple Anime Fest on August 30th, 2003, was widely released in Japan on November 8th, 2003, and was rushed to North America for a December 29th, 2003 release in order to make a bid for an Academy Award. But prior to preparing for this conversation, I had never seen this movie, but have since watched it 3 times. Derek, I know that you have a history with this whole filmography, so how many times had you seen this, and I guess when? What's the story?
I think I'd only actually watched it one time, but I've been meaning to rewatch it. But this was my first Satoshi Kon movie that I saw.
Oh, okay.
It was shortly after the new 2020 dub. So my history with Satoshi Kon is pretty recent, but like I went pretty hard on it once I discovered him. So this is the first one I watched. It was a book and movie club pick that we did for Christmas. I think because we'd heard about the new release of it and sort of like, well, we've heard his movies are good. So let's check it out. Watch this. Absolutely adored it. I think I watched Perfect Blue, I think within like weeks of watching this one. And then it was like, okay, I'm in on this guy. It's great. And then, since then I've seen all of his sadly incredibly short filmography in his anime series. And I consider him one of my favorite filmmakers. I think he's really, 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 really incredible and has literally only made masterpieces. Every single thing that he has ever done has been an absolute banger, an absolute masterpiece. So I love the guy so much. I've seen some of his other stuff multiple times. I've seen Perfect Blue multiple times, but this movie, I'm glad to have had an opportunity to make myself watch it again and then be able to talk about it, because this is definitely, I have a very special place in my heart for this one, for being my first Satoshi Kon movie.
Hell yeah. I love that. And it's not just you and me, Derek. We are joined by a guest. We've got Cass from Distant Echoes. What's up, Cass?
Hi, I'm here. Hello.
Do you have a history with this movie or with Satoshi Kon? And if so, what's the story there?
Yeah, so I do have a brief history with Satoshi Kon. I actually saw Perfect Blue before I saw this movie. So one day randomly, I decided that I wanted to binge watch some like weird trippy 80s anime. And I like Googled like best like critically acclaimed like 80s anime movies, and Perfect Blue was on most everybody's list. So I was like, okay,
even though it's 1997, but
well,
the vibe. I get the vibe though. There's a vibe. There's
more
a vibe.
on like a. I went more on like a deep dive like retro 80s vaporwave vibe. Like that was like, I just got some new like gummies, and I was like, I just want to eat some gummies and just
oh my god
watch.
Perfect Blue seems like a wild movie for that.
Yes. Yes. Fortunately, I like horror, and it's kind of. That's like a thriller.
It's like psychological horror in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
I was like, I can't wait to watch this. Actually, a lot of the movies that ended up on the list were like slightly thriller horror. There was also, I think it's called, so this is not a Satoshi Kon movie. Robot Carnival's what it's called, actually.
Huh.
If you look it up, it's actually really funny because it reminds me of Death, Love, and Robots. It's a movie.
Oh, sure.
It's a movie, but it's a movie of shorts about robots.
Mhm.
And it is incredible. And it's got that same kind of Perfect Blue, very eerie, very strange, kind of unsettling vibe to it. So Perfect Blue was my first Satoshi Kon movie. And so prior to being invited on this show was my first time seeing Tokyo Godfathers, which I'm probably going to accidentally call Tokyo Grandfathers because Tommy accidentally wrote Tokyo Grandfathers on the calendar at some point.
Amazing.
like our joint calendar. And so we both keep calling it Tokyo Grandfathers.
That's incredible.
Same difference. It's fine.
difference.
But honestly,
Yeah.
this is probably one of my favorite movies ever now. Like
It's great.
love this freaking movie.
Satoshi Kon has only, like I said, only makes masterpieces, only makes bangers. And I think it's funny too, because I think your story is probably the more normal one, because I feel like most people have seen either Perfect Blue or Paprika first. I think it's weird for anyone normally to have seen Tokyo Godfathers first. And that's not to say anything about this movie, but just because like Perfect Blue and Paprika are both so well known for breaking boundaries of how subversive and surreal their animation is and the way that they've influenced like American movies. And there's always that conversation of like Inception is just Paprika and like Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan are pulling from Perfect Blue, like all that kind of conversations, which are a little bit, I think, annoying sometimes. But like, I think those are very much in the sort of Western cultural conversation. Millennium Actress, I think, is less so, but is still a very surreal movie and a beautiful and amazing movie. And then Tokyo Godfathers, I think, gets a little bit lost in conversation because it is the like much more realistic, normal Christmas movie. There's still plenty of elements of surreality in it that I'm excited to talk about, but it's not the type of movie that a anime nerd in college is going to have a poster of on their college dorm. They absolutely would have a poster of Perfect Blue or Paprika.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for myself to have been able to get my entry point into Satoshi Kon through this movie first, because I think that it meant that I wasn't going into this movie with the weird expectation that was going to be like super surreal and then maybe be disappointed by it, like maybe some people potentially are. I think this movie is an interesting element of Satoshi Kon's filmography, and I think an evidence that if he had lived longer, I think we would have probably seen a lot more variety in his filmography, because I think he is capable of doing a great diversity of filmmaking.
It's interesting. All of us had different entry points. Because of what Falling with Style typically is, I'm in a weird position because I probably had the least familiarity with Satoshi Kon and his work. I had only seen Paprika. I saw it shortly after it came out. So that was like my entry point, like you were saying, Derek, a pretty common one, I think. But then really didn't know much else. This is only the second one that I watched. I've gone on to watch Perfect Blue. Haven't been able to work everything else in time for this one, but I have watched the beginning of Paranoia Agent.
So good.
And everything, like you said, Derek, is a banger. It's all so good. But we'll talk about him.
Yeah, sorry, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting one. I mean, and for a lot of reasons, because it's very different, this episode, than what we typically do. I mean, it's a bit odd but exciting because for several reasons. There's a lot of firsts for our podcast. We've never covered a completely international production. By extension, we've never covered a film that was specifically translated or interpreted for Western audiences into English. All of our stuff has been American productions. Specifically, this is a Japanese production, and Japan's animation industry is a deep and historied one that is not the same as the American industry's story. It's the first traditionally animated movie we've talked about. It's animated digitally, but it is still traditional animation. It's 2D, it is flat. We are used to 3D computer-generated animation. And like I said, I'm probably the least familiar person with Satoshi Kon, at least coming into this. So like everything I've learned, I just learned for this podcast, which is exciting because now my head is like full of a billion Satoshi Kon things. So let's talk about Satoshi Kon, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Satoshi Kon debuts as a manga artist in 1984. His short manga Toriko immediately gained him attention. It earned recognition at that year's Chiba Tetsuya Awards, which are named for a famous manga artist. So like immediately, the very first thing he does, people are like, oh, that's really good. And that just continues to be his story, basically. While he was working at Young Magazine, he got to know and did uncredited work for Katsuhiro Otomo on Akira, which was being serialized at the time. Of course. So he worked on Akira to some extent, or at least was around Otomo when he was doing it. Kon specifically says, thanks to Mr. Otomo's help, I was able to begin working in the animation industry, or the anime industry. So basically a protege of this guy, continues to work with him. There are a few other instances where he'll work with Otomo. And this was all before he graduated university. So he had like a recognized short manga, was working on Akira, was publishing in a magazine and editing in a magazine, all before he graduated, which is so fucking wild. We're not going to talk about every single thing he did unless you guys want to bring up stuff that I don't, but a few things prior to his own films that I think are particularly relevant to what he ends up going on to do. Shortly after graduation, Kon wrote a manga adaptation of Katsuhiro Otomo's film World Apartment Horror, which was co-written by Keiko Nobumoto, who I already mentioned because she co-wrote Tokyo Godfathers. So right off the bat, is working with somebody under Otomo that he will then work again with to make this movie. He also landed his first role as an art director and set designer for the 91 sci-fi thriller Rojin Z, which I haven't been able to watch yet, but sounds fucking wild. Do either of you know this one?
No.
It's about like a robotic hospital bed that has the ability to like transcribe or transmit like invalid patients' thoughts, and then also might be somewhat sentient. I'm not really sure. It seems like a fun movie to not know that much about. So
Holy shit.
Once I got to a certain point in the summary, I was like, I'm going to stop and I'll find that later.
Go in on my command. All ready, men? Stand by.
Stop there!
Oh.
Pull him off! Your men are bound to
That's
hurt
her.
him!
Arrest that girl. Grab her. You're under...
You brutes! Let go of that girl at once!
What the? Who said that?
Are you all right, Haruko?
I'm fine, but Mr. Takazawa, what about him?
He's fine, too. He's just taking a quiet little nap.
He must be exhausted.
Yes, so if you'll excuse us...
It must be destroyed. What? We have to take steps to see the public never finds out that it got out of control.
Excuse me, could we get through, please?
They won't let you by! No! Get back! Stop! Mr. Takazawa's in that bed! Mr. Takazawa! Stop!
Is it a horror movie? Because it sounds like that would be a horror movie, right?
It feels like if it's not, then it's not a horror movie in the same way that Perfect Blue would not be. You know what I mean? I think it's like a thriller that is probably quite scary, but I'm not totally sure. But it feels like the kind of thing that would inform the type of stuff that Satoshi Kon feels comfortable working on later on, or at least from what we've seen. Around that same time, all this is kind of happening at the same time, he wrote the screenplay for Magnetic Rose, which was adapted from an Otomo story of the same name for the 95 sci-fi anthology film Memories. Otomo then directed that adaptation that Kon wrote for that segment of Memories. So continuing to work with him. He ended up getting into directing because while he was working on episodes of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which I didn't even realize he did until this point.
It's not like the current. It's like
no.
there's
It's
like
the
a
original.
90s, like the original 90s adaptation of it. Yeah.
When he was working on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in various roles as a key animator and a writer and a director, he observed that he was only kind of responsible for supervising parts of the process because he was working on a television series, and he wanted to have a go at directing the entire process, which included sound and voice acting and all these other things that he wouldn't really have a ton of influence over working on episodes of a TV show. And he was like, I think I got to do a movie then. Like, that's where the director has all the supervising control. You know, I can have influence over the whole process. And he mentioned on his blog, which if you've never checked out his blog, you should definitely check it out. It's easily translatable. And he had a blog for many, many years, and it's really fascinating to read. He mentioned that Masao Murayama had seen his work on JoJo's and specifically invited him to direct Perfect Blue, which is wild. So Perfect Blue, written by Sadayuki Morai from a Yoshikazu Takeuchi book of the same name. So seeing his work on, maybe I think it amounts to like 4 episodes of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in various roles, Murayama is like, I think you'd be good for this really wild fucking movie called Perfect Blue.
And be in control of all of it.
And I think to be fair, I don't know that they realized that Perfect Blue was going to be what it was, because like the original book that it was based on, like the movie is nothing like the original book.
Well, and I think part of that sounds like it's his influence to some extent. You know what I mean?
I think it was because like the reason that there's like the movie is called Perfect Blue because the book was called Perfect Blue, and there's a reason that the book is called Perfect Blue. The movie, there's no reason it's called Perfect Blue. It's just like a cool name for the movie.
Yeah.
You know, like it really has like very little. I mean, I don't want to say it has very little to do with the book, but like what the book does is, I think the book is very much a more standard like murder mystery type of thing, and the movie, all the surrealism and stuff is like Cohen just being like, we could make a normal movie or we could make a masterpiece. So.
Yeah, and he decided masterpiece, and I'm glad for it, because that movie rules.
Yeah.
He speaks really highly of Murayama, understandably. We alluded to it, but Kohn died pretty suddenly and unexpectedly. And right before that happened, he was talking and reflecting on his blog about a lot of people. And he said of Murayama, seeing him for the final time, he says, a wave of gratitude for being able to work with this person and a joy that I can't put into words came over me. I'm truly grateful to Murayama for giving me the opportunity to share my strange ideas with the world, which I just think is really, really sweet. And that whole relationship starts with him inviting him to direct Perfect Blue right at the time when Satoshi Kon is sort of like, I want to have more influence over these stories, and I want to be able to put more of myself into these stories and my vision and my strange ideas into these stories. And you're right, Derek, he makes a masterpiece. Perfect Blue is very well received critically, pretty much immediately. It snags a handful of festival and genre awards, and he never stops. Like, he doesn't stop making absolute awesome movies. His next film, Millennium Actress, was his first written and directed by film. It was also critically acclaimed. It also received several festival awards as well as nominations at the Annies for Best Animated Feature, Directing, and Production. I know you've seen these ones, Derek. Cass, have you seen either? You've seen Perfect Blue. Have you seen Millennium Actress?
I have not. I think I need to watch all of them, though.
I think Millennium Actress is interesting to watch. Like, if you watch them in order, I think there's a trajectory that makes sense, because like Perfect Blue is obviously, you know, it is a very like dark and often upsetting movie. Millennium Actress definitely has darkness in it, but is such a step up in terms of, not a step up, but like a step in the direction of like a lot more like lighter fare. Like it's a drama, and it's still a very, very, very surreal movie. But I do think like there is even though there's definitely dark things in that movie and sad things in the movie, there's always this sort of sense of like uplifting, and it really is just ultimately like an actress reflecting on her long life in one way or another, and then the sort of lines get blurred between what she's talking about that was a movie versus what was actually real. And they do a lot of really interesting things with that. But I think it's just it's an interesting stepping stone to get to this movie, which is a comedy ultimately. Like this movie is Tokyo Godfathers is a comedy. Millennium Actress is sort of like, I think the sort of proof of concept, I think maybe for Cohen, that it's like, yeah, I made this really great depressing movie, but I can also just make like a beautiful, nice drama that's going to make you feel good at the end of it. And then it's like, now I can make a beautiful, nice comedy that will make you feel really good the entire time. So
yeah. And I agree with you, Derek. I think based on the stuff that I've seen him say and the little sample of things that we have, if he had been able to continue making things, I think that sort of swerving would have just continued to happen. I mean, there's certain thematic things that he likes to explore, but I don't think there would ever be like a true surprise if he pulled out something that seemed unconventional, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you were going to talk about this at all, but I think that the movie that was in production when he died, I think there's not a ton of information about it, but I think that the implication is that it probably was going to be a little more of a kids movie,
yes,
or at least aimed towards younger audiences. So.
Yeah, we know a little. Yeah, we know a little bit about that one. The only other movie that we haven't mentioned yet is Paprika, which, like I said, was the first one I had seen. He co-wrote that one as well. Both Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika also critically acclaimed. Both of them won awards. Paprika is wild because, not knowing Satoshi Kon or anything, it just like kind of blew my mind, and I wasn't sure like what I was watching half the time with that one, especially because I wasn't used to what he's doing, which is that weird reality warping. Can you trust what you're seeing at any given moment type of stuff? All of his movies are really beautiful, but Paprika is like a visual smorgasbord. It is wild.
Yeah,
it's
I think
really cool.
There's an argument that Paprika is probably like the best looking movie that he ever made. I would say.
I think that makes sense because having only made the 4 movies, his budget increased pretty exponentially with each movie. So like the one we're talking about, he made for less than $1 million, or the equivalent of less than $1 million. And then immediately is given a bigger chunk of change for Millennium Actress, and then Tokyo Godfathers has a bigger budget, and Paprika would have had certainly the most, or at least the most resources. So it makes sense. They're all beautiful because they have a particular style and like vision behind them. But I think just like technically what they're able to pull off in Paprika kind of stands apart. We reference Paranoia Agent. In addition to the 4 feature films, his other sort of like major on-screen work is 2004's 13-episode Paranoia Agent. He created it, he directed it. It was written by Seishi Minakami, who goes on to co-write Paprika. Anything you want to add about that one, Derek? It does sort of explore, at least from what I've seen, some of the same stuff as far as like, can the characters trust what they're seeing in any given moment? But I haven't finished it, so I don't know what else it kind of pulls in.
I can't say it until you finish it. It's just a fascinating show. It's like no other anime I've ever seen. Like when you watch it as a whole, it's like no other anime I've ever seen. It really just does some really interesting things, and I think really pushes the boundaries of what a television miniseries can do, is what I will say. So
yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I already get that sense, and I haven't even gotten to what I'm sure you're thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I want to watch this now.
Yes.
I mean,
you absolutely should.
It's only 13 episodes. It is, and it's like, it's the kind of show where it's like, as soon as you're like, oh, I think I get what like the premise and the formula of this is, then you get to an episode, it's sort of like, never mind, I have no fucking idea what this show even is.
I love that shit.
And then by the end, it still like feels like it was a very cohesive thematic thing that you understand by the end of it, even if you didn't understand shit the entire way up to the end.
He reminds me a lot of David Lynch. The way that I feel when I watch David Lynch movies or David Lynch TV shows, which I've been doing a lot recently again.
Sure.
And there's just something about it, especially Perfect Blue, like especially the surrealism where like you're like, is this happening in real life in the movie, or is this like a dream sequence? I'm not sure. And you never really know.
Yeah, I think the David Lynch comparison is really apt because I think, there's plenty of filmmakers that do weird artsy stuff and it may or may not hit with you. But I think the thing that both David Lynch and Satoshi Kon are really good at is like, in the midst of all the surrealism and the dreamlike sequences and things like that, there is always still like a beating human heart and like really intense empathy and like optimism. Like, like David Lynch stuff, even when it's really dark, it's usually coming from a side where it's sort of like, there's evil in the world, but if there's evil in the world, it means there's also good. And good guys can win sometimes. And with like Satoshi Kon, it's the same way. It's like, even when there's dark, all of his movies have happy endings. Like Perfect Blue, as disturbing as it is, it has a happy ending at the end of it. And it honestly kind of an uplifting ending in my opinion. So it's like, I think he's really good at really just honing in at humanity and like what it means to be a person and the importance of like seeing people for who they are and seeing their worth, which is like all over Tokyo Godfathers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that ultimately is like the connective tissue between these movies that seem nothing like Tokyo Godfathers and Tokyo Godfathers. There's some other little sort of threads, but ultimately it's that like humanity that bleeds through everything he does.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I think I'm glad in retrospect that I saw Tokyo Godfathers before his other things, because I feel like I was looking for that in his other movies that I watched since I saw this first. Because I think once you realize that, it's sort of like there's like just intense empathy in all of his works in a way that not other filmmakers often are able to pull off.
Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately, on August 24th, 2010, at just 46 years old, Cohn died from pancreatic cancer, a diagnosis he'd received just 4 months earlier. And like you said, Derek, he was in the middle of producing his 5th feature film called Dreaming Machine, which he described as for younger audiences and like a road movie for robots. He said there were no human characters in it, and it was something he was confident anybody who'd watched any of his movies would enjoy, but specifically was one that was being made for younger audiences, which I would have loved to see. They obviously halted production. Madhouse briefly attempted to continue production on it. I think Satoshi Kon really wanted them to. He talks about that in his final blog, but they ultimately halted it and determined that they can't replace his direction. And until they could find anyone who could do what he does, there's no way they'd be able to finish it, which is bittersweet. I mean, it's really sweet for them to acknowledge that he was like kind of singular in his talent and vision. But it sounds like he also would have really loved for people to see it. So there are, I mean, you can get bits and pieces of it. You can see some visuals from it. It's not like they didn't complete any of it, but they also haven't like released an unfinished work. So
yeah.
I think his humanity is so interesting. Like his exploration of humanity is so interesting because he's kind of like an odd duck of a person, from what I can kind of gather. Like the way that he views human interaction and the way that he views himself is so funny. Like it kind of feels like he views himself as a character in a story that he almost doesn't quite belong in sometimes. So it's really interesting to hear his reflections or read his reflections on his blog. I mean, one of the things he said in his final blog, which he wrote like right before he died and then had his family publish upon his death.
Wow.
Because he kept it largely secret. Like he kept his diagnosis pretty private. And he said about that, I wanted to announce my cancer on the internet and report on the rest of my life every day, but I thought that the planned death of Satoshi Kon would have various impacts, even if they were small. So like just the way he thinks about the world and the way that he sort of like considers his role in the world is so fascinating.
It almost sounds like he's talking about like an upcoming episode of a movie or a book, like a character death that's on the way.
Yeah. Like, well, I think he envisions how it would be viewed as a story. You know what I mean? I think I don't think he feels he's particularly separate from his characters. And so I think that probably goes in both directions where he's able to see what that would mean to people and how people would create a narrative about it, you know?
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
The only other thing I want to mention with this, I kind of alluded to it, but in that final blog, he talked about Dreaming Machine, and he said, if things go wrong, there's a good chance that the cuts that I've worked on so hard will never be seen by anybody. After all, Satoshi Kon has the original story, the script, the characters and perspective, the storyboards, and the musical identity, which is just like an interesting thought, right? Like it's such an insight into like his mind and how he sees his own mind, especially paired with what the producer was saying about not being able to replace him, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
I really truly think he was like a special creator on this planet.
I think he was too. It's really, I mean, I don't know, like, you know, it's almost passe nowadays, especially just to be like, you know, the bad ones are never the ones that die. It's only the good ones that seem to die. But it feels like so, I don't know. I feel that so strongly.
No, that's
him.
real.
It's just, I feel that so strongly with him because it's just like this guy deserved to have just a huge filmography and just like experiment and try different things. And like, I would have loved to see the movie that he does that like people don't like, because no matter what, it would be interesting, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I don't think that he would ever be able to make a movie that wasn't some kind of fascinating piece of art. I feel like most things that he would make would be amazing. And the few things that aren't amazing would be like some of the most interesting things ever made still. Like, and it just, it feels uniquely tragic that we lost him as soon as we did. And like such a gift that we at least got 4 movies in an anime out of him.
Truly.
But God, I wish we had so much more than that.
Yeah, because I think the stories he would have told would just continue the sort of trajectory he's on, which is simultaneously like looking at the world around him and telling stories of these people that he's wondering about and thinking about and observing, but also these big questions about reality and existence. So it's like this simultaneous mix of like really, really grounded acknowledgement of all different kinds of people, which we see so much of in Tokyo Godfathers, and we'll talk a whole lot about. But then these like big, weird, abstract, heady things that almost seem like untouchable at the same time. So
yeah.
I do want to mention Keiko Nobumoto, the co-writer of this. We'll talk tons more about Satoshi Kon, but I don't want to leave her out of the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Like Kon, Nobumoto was somewhat of an Otomo protege. She co-wrote that World Apartment horror film that Kon wrote the manga adaptation for, and she was a production assistant on the Akira film, which Otomo himself adapted and directed. So the two of them together, I think, are only like a year apart. They're about the same age. I don't know if this is actually the story, but it feels like they're these two like Otomo proteges, like going out into the world and creating masterpieces, because Nobumoto like already had a pretty massive credit by the time she was working on Tokyo Godfathers with Kon, because she was the head writer on the Cowboy Bebop anime, which was immediately critically acclaimed. Like the moment it happened, everyone was like, this is a masterpiece.
Isn't that wild?
Truly unbelievable. Like before she worked on this, you know?
She died of cancer as well.
Yeah, in 2021, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
I know.
know.
Quit taking them.
And then David Lynch too.
Yeah. She was pretty incredible though. I mean, she like I mentioned, writer of Cowboy Bebop, also the movie. She also created and wrote the 2003 Wolf's Rain anime and its manga adaptation, which also performed well and was received very well. She's a credited writer on every episode of the 2014 space opera Space Dandy and 2019's Carol and Tuesday, which was generally well received, but is not at all lacking in criticism of its depictions of queerness. So I'm very extremely curious about that one, and will absolutely be bumping it up on my queue because I'm so interested. So interested. And then Kon has credited his partnership with Nobumoto specifically as the reason Hana ends up being such a fleshed out, complex, and enduringly beloved character in Tokyo Godfathers and just the general anime landscape. He talks about her a lot when he talks about Hana.
She's also credited as a scenario supervisor on the first
Kingdom Hearts. Yeah.
Okay.
So no wonder she was good at rating a queer character. Like she worked on the game that was made for the gays.
The gayest game in existence. Well, maybe not the gayest, but one of the top.
One of the
top 3 gayest games ever made.
Yeah. So I mean, God, imagine these two together. It would just be like unfathomable. I wouldn't be able to understand anything they're talking about. I wouldn't be able to perceive them, I don't think, you know.
Yeah. But I wish we got more movies with them working together.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. Yeah. Incredible stuff. I guess it's worth mentioning that there's so many places we could go, but it's worth mentioning that this movie was inspired by Three Godfathers, a Western that Satoshi Kon had watched and I think was fond of, which itself was inspired by The Three Godfathers, which is like a 1913 novelette. It's basically, any given one of these is basically the story of like typically 3 men who come across a baby and then have to figure out what to do with this baby. And there's so many examples of this in cinema. I mean, literally Three Men and a Baby.
Yep.
I keep seeing, it like annoys me how much I keep seeing this, but like Ice Age keeps coming up in this conversation. Like there's so many examples. Oh yeah, so many examples.
Did that happen in Ice Age?
The first Ice Age movie is basically a Three Godfathers
But it's
situation.
an animal baby, right?
No, it's a real human baby.
Oh.
I say real human baby, like
a
the
real
animals aren't
baby.
real. Yeah,
It's kidnapped.
yeah. They, yeah.
I
But
had no idea that was.
I've never seen them either, so.
yeah. But
didn't
like
realize that.
it's a story that I think is like very easily relatable to, you know, this sort of like out of water sort of coming together with people you might not necessarily get along with to try to figure out this like very human problem.
Right.
So it makes sense that this is something that he would kind of relate to. And he does talk about like why he wanted to do this movie in general, especially because lots of people asked him, like, why this? Why are you making a movie about homeless people? Why are you making this movie, especially when the movies you've made so far are these big sort of reality warping types of things? And he said to Time, my ideas for movies come from the world I live in. When I walk down the street, I see homeless people. I start to wonder why they didn't show up in movies. It seemed like an obvious topic. And then he sort of compared his inspiration to what happens in the movie itself, where he says, you know, these homeless people pick up a baby from the trash, and I pick up an idea that had been thrown away that nobody was using. So I think he sees these people that no one's really talking about, or sees these characters around him or these humans around him that he's never seen reflected in any stories, and can easily imagine stories about them, which I think is great.
I love that. He's just such an empathetic person. And that's
I
just
think
like,
so.
and that's such like, it's like a beautiful thing that you can do as an artist too, right? Like that I feel like, I don't know, at least in like corporate art doesn't ever take advantage of, that it's just like part of what you can do when you're an artist is just like, look at the world around you and just think of like, what is that person's story? And I want to learn what that story is and tell that, you know, like it's very simple and straightforward, but I think sometimes it just gets sort of lost in the way that we look at storytelling sometimes. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think that corporate art thing is like such a perfect thing to mention, because Satoshi Kon's movies are so clearly like an artistic vision. Like they are his artistic vision. And I think you're so right. Eventually he probably, or maybe, I don't even know, maybe not, might have made a movie that people didn't like, but it still would have had his artistic vision in it. And you can like pretty much guarantee that, you know?
Yeah, right.
The homelessness thing is, I think, significant because this movie comes out in 2003. Satoshi Kon gets his start in the industry in the early 90s. And this is a period of time where homelessness, which is relatively unusual in Japan, at least just by numbers alone, was at kind of an all-time high after, like, post-World War II. Obviously, that's like its own story. But after World War II, 2003 literally is like the peak of a post-economic collapse wave of homelessness in Japan and specifically in Tokyo. So when he says he saw people, you know, on the street, like he's seeing a very specific situation and a very specific history and a very specific context that I imagine he felt people weren't talking enough about, or at the very least he wasn't seeing enough about.
Yeah, like I think there was a really significant recession in the 90s, so they would still be feeling that in the early 2000s. And it is a thing that I think people are uncomfortable with talking about often. Like Americans are the same way, where it's just like, you know, like we'll complain about like egg prices for ourselves, but like we would like to just ignore that there are homeless people on the streets right now all the time, just because you don't want to make yourself feel bad, you know? So we're just going to ignore that they exist at all, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate this movie for that reason. I grew up right next to Cleveland, which isn't a huge city, but it's like a city. It's a big city. And anytime we would go in for like a baseball game or go into the city for whatever, like I distinctly remember being taught by my parents to like not see homeless people.
Like don't make eye contact.
Act like you don't see them. Yeah. Don't make eye contact. Don't talk to them. Don't do anything. Because the assumption is, you know, that they're there from their own circumstances, or they're going to take advantage of you, or that they're I mean, there's all these wild assumptions that I was taught from my parents that like just aren't necessarily true, you know?
And hard to unlearn too. Like
very.
It's, you know, like if you've been trained to see someone as subhuman essentially, or not see them at all, like it's really hard to break out of that.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I could keep talking forever about like Satoshi Kon and his career, as short as it was, and all the inspiration, all that stuff. But we got to talk about Tokyo Godfathers because it's so good, and we're already talking about the inspiration behind it. So I guess you said this was the first time you watched it, Cass?
Yes, I had never
seen
it.
What are your
before.
Overall sort of feelings and reaction to it? I'm guessing you like it. It
I
sounds like
love
you like it.
I think it's one of my favorite movies ever. Like, I think it just skyrocketed to the very top of my list of everything. I told Tommy, like, I don't really get an urge to watch movies over and over again. Like, I just don't. Like, I'll put like TV shows on in the background that I've watched before, but I still have to like have a really long like spread of time between that, because I just get, I don't know, my brain, I just get very agitated at seeing or hearing the same thing. Like it just pisses me off. I don't know why. But like I think that says something about this movie because I told Tommy, like, I already want to rewatch it. Like, and I just watched it like 3 days ago. And like, it moved me in so many ways. I cried multiple times watching it. Like, I was just like making a lot of noises. Like, I was just so enraptured with it. I loved all of the characters. Especially Hana, of course, but I also just like, I loved the animation. I loved the story. I loved every single thing about it. I adore that movie.
Yeah, it's really great. The sort of rewatch thing is so interesting too, because I'll rewatch movies, but I don't rewatch them constantly. And sometimes when I'm like preparing for a podcast, I'm like, oh shoot, I got to make time to like rewatch that thing so I can like refresh my memory or whatever. But this one, every time I rewatched it, I was like, ooh, I get to rewatch this movie. Like, it's so delightful. You know what I mean? So yeah, I totally get that. Derek, do you remember your first impressions of this one when you first watched it? Well, it wasn't that long ago, right?
It was in like, it was like 2021, I think. So it's been
shortly
been
after
years,
you said the new version, the GKIDS version that came out.
And I'm pretty sure I believe I watched the dub of it because that was what was out. And I loved it. And, you know, this was during a time I watched it around Christmas time too. So it was like perfect timing. And I do think that it's like, especially when you watch it, when you're watching other Christmas movies around it, which like Christmas movies, you can love them and they're still pretty awful sometimes. Like a lot of Christmas movies are pretty bad. Yeah. And then you watch this and it's just like, I feel like it gave me all of the joy that I wanted from a Christmas movie in so many ways. But was actually like a piece of art too. And yeah, it really moved me. And I think I knew about Hana as a character, like in the basic general idea that there is a queer character in this movie of some kind. I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, sure, sounds good. So I didn't really know what I was getting into with her either. So that was such an amazing surprise to be like, oh my God, this character is incredible. Like, every character in this movie is incredible, but like Hana especially like kind of blew me away with how just well written and complex of a character she is.
Yeah. I think Hana is like an all-time anime protagonist. Like, she's so memorable and she's so unique and singular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in so many ways. Yeah, we talked briefly about the GKIDS thing, but Derek, do you know much of the history behind that one to speak to?
In the original Japanese, Hana is voiced by a cis man. And I think that there's a conversation we can have where I think there was just it was just, I think it's just from a place of like ignorance that was not uncommon. You know, basically in media, just basically before like 2010 or whatever, where just like anyone who was making movies and TV shows just did not know how to talk about trans people or like queer people in general, a lot of ways. And so a lot of the production of it was, they just referred to Hana as just a drag queen, and sometimes would even, like the translations for behind the scenes stuff would even use like he, him pronouns. Obviously with Japanese pronouns, it's sort of ambiguous depending on how you're translating it, because a lot of the ways the Japanese language is, like, it's gender neutral. So that might have been more of like a translator subtitler choice.
And that was like really, really prevalent. I mean, if you read basically like anything about this movie that's like officially published prior to 2019, honestly, like, there's so much of just calling Hana he, him, like, just as a, and some people will even like, it's really annoying. Some people will like go out of their way to justify why they're doing that. And I'm just sort of like, you're doing too much. You're doing so much.
Because I think it comes from the same place that, like, I think the perfect comparison is like To Wong Fu. Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
Sure.
Because that's another movie that it's like, they're drag queens is what they're called throughout that whole movie. That is how it's billed. That is how it's written. But when you watch the movie, it's like, they're like, it all makes more sense that they're either trans women or genderqueer in some way. Like the drag queen, they are drag queens in that they perform as drag queens, but like they also live as women. Like that's a whole part of the movie. Yeah. But they're just, but the entire time sort of like, well, they're men who dress as women though. That's what they are. And I don't think it's coming from any bad place or anything like that. It's not coming from a place of malice. It is just coming from a place of like either flat ignorance or just wanting to simplify it for an audience of stupid people who aren't gonna understand the complexity of gender in any way. Because, you know, Tu Wong Fu is like so empathetic towards those characters. Like, I love that movie. Yeah. You just kind of have to just be like, you know, whatever. Like the terminology, you just kind of have to ignore that part, because that movie outside of that is like so good to those characters as queer characters. I think with this movie, when it was sort of being marketed and I think even probably initially written, I think it was kind of that sort of mindset where it's just like, Hana's a drag queen, because it's just like a man who dresses like a woman, right? But then as they're writing Hana, I feel like they're also still writing it from the perspective of Hana, like saying that like she's a woman. Like it's like, you know, like they're still writing over and over again. So I don't know if it was a cognitive dissonance thing as they were writing it or misunderstanding as writing it, but like regardless of the intention, how that character ends up playing out on screen is as a trans woman. Like that is absolutely what it is. But because it was 2003 and because the sort of understanding was that like she's a drag queen, the Japanese voice is a cis man. The initial American dub voice is a cis man. I don't blame them for it. I understand what the thought process is for that. And again, I think it comes from a place of ignorance. But once the decision to re-release this movie was made and GKIDS wanted to do another dub of it, which is very common for anime, that you do a newer dub, a fresher dub that you know, by all accounts is better than the older one that was released. I think I feel like people in production were aware, and I'm sure conversations had been had in the film world in the in-between time, that it's just like, Hana is a trans character. And like, it's pretty clear to us nowadays in 2019 that that's what that is. And we can't just pretend that that's not the case, which is why they decide for the 2019 dub to hire an actual trans woman to play Hana.
Did you know any of this stuff prior, Cass, or did you go into this movie like pretty much totally?
Oh, no, I had no idea. I'm fascinated. This is so great. Yeah. I'm so glad that they redubbed it. That's so fucking cool. I had no idea.
Did you watch it in Japanese?
I because we're going to Japan in like 2 weeks, I've been very, very hard on watching things in Japanese just to get more passive listening, but we watched it with the dub. I think. Yeah. I can't even remember. I'm like having a blur in my brain. I was just so like into the movie. I don't even think I could tell what language it was in, to be quite honest. Like
But I mean, that works either way, because I without knowing anything about that character, you know, I'm guessing you walked away from this movie also seeing a trans woman in this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, like it's hard not to.
Yeah. And I think when they did the retranslation for the dub too, they do change some of the lines. Like I watched it with the current dub and with the original Japanese subtitles at the same time. And it's sort of interesting. Like they still, like, obviously there are times when Hana is still like called like male terminology and stuff like that. Just to piss her off. So like that's still there. But I think they do lessen it sometimes, so it's not as constant throughout the movie, which I think is fair, just to be nicer to her. One of the things that I thought was most interesting that they changed in the translation, it's at least in the current Japanese translation that's on the disc. They translate in her flashback when she's performing and like beats up the audience member who's heckling her. The audience member calls her Pops, and that's why she gets mad at him and attacks him. And then in the dub, he calls her a fairy. And like fairy is usually leveled at like gay men specifically, so it still works. But it is interesting that they chose to kind of soften it, because Pops is a much more gendered term than fairy is, I think. So it's just, but I think that those were conscious choices just to like, I think, make it even more clear to everyone that it's like, this is a trans woman.
So now I have to know which one I watched, because I really cannot remember. And the reason I think it's important is because, and maybe you guys can answer this, I feel like at least whether I was watching it dubbed or not, we always have subtitles on. Like we always have to have subtitles on. And they were definitely using a stronger term than fairy in the version that I was watching.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would guess that you probably watch you probably watched it in Japanese with the original subtitles, would be my guess.
Okay.
That would be my guess. Because, yeah, there is harsher language with those original subtitles.
F word, not fairy. That was the word that was used a lot.
Okay. That's so okay. So yeah, so you watch probably, and that's probably.
So I think I did watch it in Japanese.
So you watch it in Japanese and probably the older translation of it, because the current Blu-ray that's out now, the translation of it is not the F slur.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
they were dropping F slurs all over the place on the one I watched.
I was wondering about that though, because that is the perils of watching a translated movie of any kind, because it's not even just subs versus dubs. It's like, how are you translating the subs?
Which, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's a slur, but like, I don't know. That slur like doesn't bother me in the same way. I don't know why, just because it's so prevalent in like gay like stuff. You know what I mean?
It's been reclaimed in many ways.
Yes, exactly. So it didn't bother me. It wasn't like, oh my God. I mean, the first time I heard it, I was like, whoa. Like, I was kind of surprised.
I understand why they soften it, because this movie is, it's not like, maybe it's not a kid's movie necessarily, but it's definitely like, I feel like this can be a family movie.
Sure.
And I feel like there's no reason that you really need to have real strong slurs in this movie.
To the same extent that like Home Alone is like a family movie, right? Like there's parts of Home Alone that are probably not kid friendly, but it's about the same extent, Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I definitely want to dig into that more, because I honestly think you could show this to most kids and it would be totally fine. But I do think one thing that's interesting about the subs, dubs, which version of the dub you watch, which version of the subs you get, is interesting, because I do think regardless of which one you're getting, ultimately I think the film presents Hana as someone we are supposed to connect with and root for and feel a lot of empathy for and want to be friends with or family with or whatever. And so oftentimes when something homophobic or transphobic or just hateful is being directed at her, it is something that I don't think we are supposed to endorse based on how it is presented, right? So I can understand why they would want to soften, or why they would want to soften it, just to make it abundantly clear what the movie's sort of perspective on Hana is and how we're supposed to feel about it. But I also understand them not totally taking it away, because, it is part of her experience and part of a lot of people's experience to figure out how to endure that stuff, if at all. So I do think, like, looking at people talking about this movie, occasionally you'll run into somebody who's sort of like, I just watched Tokyo Godfathers for the first time, and I think, is it transphobic? And it's always interesting to see the responses, because a lot of times it is a discussion of exactly that, right? Where it's sort of like, well, how are they using the language, or how are we supposed to interpret the people who are using that language? Sometimes in this movie, it is Gin or Miyuki who says something to Hana, but that also still feels different than the flashback where the patron is saying something to Hana,
Yes.
It's the difference between family and friends who kind of know how to push your buttons versus somebody who's trying to hurt you. And I think the movie, especially in the new dub, makes those distinctions really, really clear.
I think some of them were still even obvious in the one that I watched with the F slur, because Gin, like, there would be moments where like he would use that slur like to Hana, but then in the same breath, or like a few moments later, they're talking to each other, which is mostly the animation and just the personality of the story, like they're a bickering old couple, like, and they obviously care so much deeply about one another. And Miyuki seems to be like their kid, you know what I mean? And you definitely get that sense in the dialogue in the one that I watched as well, like calling each other like husband and wife, or like mom or dad. And like those that terminology is still there. And so that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's like when you're really mad, you use the wrong word towards someone you really love, you know what I mean? But like you just...
And it's one of those times where it's like, I know you're being hurtful right now.
Yes.
And I know you're being hurtful because you're upset.
Yep.
And not because you want to hurt me. You know?
Yes.
Well, it's a thing I like about this movie is the relationship between the three leads. Like, it's very gruff, and they are unafraid of being so incredibly mean to each other, but you can tell that it's like, this is just their relationship. Like, that is kind of, their love is sort of built on poking and prodding at each other and being mean to them, because it's always coming from a place of love, and usually because they want the other person to be better is why they're so nasty to each other.
Yeah, this is why I think, this is a Christmas movie that doesn't focus a whole lot in a saccharine way on Christmas, and it's a family movie that doesn't focus a whole lot in a saccharine way on family. And that's why I think like you really could kind of present this to any kid, you know, and it would still work. And I think there's really valuable stuff in here, you know. And one of the reasons we're talking about the movies that we're talking about, or the stories that we're talking about, is the idea of including this like clear and unafraid queerness. And in this movie, I think a lot of that also extends to the family unit that is being presented, and just their sheer sort of composition and how they operate with each other and how they've come together, and the unconventional nature of their relationship is sort of representative of a queer family unit in many ways. I think that's a big thing that's valuable for anybody to take away from this movie, but especially kids, or I think very specifically like teenagers, I feel like would watch this movie and see all these different kinds of interactions and see that these are all still really warm, empathetic people who care about each other, even though they initially come across as these like gruff, kind of like harsh personalities.
I wanted to call out too, I don't know if you were planning to, if you had information on this, Doug, but the actual actress who does do Hana's voice in the dub.
Sure, yeah, talk about her.
So it's Shakina Nayfack.
Mm-hmm.
So she's done some like live action work, like actually pretty important live action work. Like she was in the Hulu show Difficult People, but she was the first trans person to have a starring role in a major network comedy show in Connecting in 2020, but that was canceled after like 4 episodes, unfortunately. Of course. But what's interesting about Tokyo Godfathers, this was like her first voice acting role.
Yeah.
Ever. And
Yeah.
I think so far maybe her only. I don't know if she's done any other voice acting since
Yeah,
then.
I think it's her own. I think it's her only one. There's a feature on the Blu-ray, if you happen to watch this, the GKIDS Blu-ray version, that features her, and she talks about how she hasn't done it and what some of the challenges were.
One of your cabs picked up a young woman with a baby. Cab number 12-25. Send it to a Tokyo Tower. I could be there in a few minutes.
One of the things that's been so fun about this process is learning how to be a voice actor, because I'm such an embodied person, especially when doing comedy. And there are scenes where Hana is running and shouting, and to do it all like on a microphone that's right here by your face, figuring out how to get the breath to make it sound like you're exhausted when you're just standing there. It's a lot, it's a whole different skill set, and it's been really fun to explore that.
But ultimately she was like, but it was really fun and I'd love to do more of it. And so I hope eventually she gets to do more of it.
I have to listen to it now. I just like,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I will say I did whatever cis dude was doing the voice for Hana in the Japanese version. He did a fucking good job. Like, he's so emotional, and like, I don't know, I enjoyed it. I was just in love. He did a great job.
In a weird coincidence, he also, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, had not done voice acting prior to doing this.
Wow.
Yeah, I think all 3 of the main actors in the original Japanese version were like primarily live action actors.
I know for sure that Hana and Miyuki's were, but I can't remember much about Gin's Japanese voice actor.
But I think they were still like, it's just based on how they talk about it on the special feature on the Blu-ray, like that. Those voice actors still clearly have like a lot of love for that character. Like the voice actor for Gin, I remember was talking about like, you know, Hana is a drag queen. Do you know the word drag queen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't, I hope you learn it from this movie.
Yes.
And I think, which is sort of like, I think that they had the perspective of sort of like, this is a thing people should know about, that like queer people exist, you know, and maybe like drag queen isn't really the right word for her necessarily, as we define it now, but like the intention is like so clear there. And I think Hana's voice actor was like talking about it sort of like, I like Hana because Hana has pride as a human being, like not as a man or a woman, but as a human being. And like, that's sort of the whole thing about it, you know? I think it makes sense that they had good performances, because I think that they seem to understand the empathy that was behind this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I didn't look into the original English dubbing cast, to be totally honest, but the original Japanese cast and the original, or the GKIDS cast, like none of them I think are like big massive names, at least in voice acting, right? And so it's interesting. I think these have to be people that you trust with these roles. I think they have to be people that care about the material, because I think it comes through that they do. You know, I don't know that you can have the rapport that these 3 characters have without caring about the characters you're portraying or their stories. And I think that care and that humanity, which we've been talking about this whole time, is what ultimately makes Hana work regardless of whatever version you're watching or regardless of what the understanding was at the time making her character, right? Because I do think my best guess and understanding is that Satoshi Kon just used the terminology he knew, right? Like he specifically says, I didn't base Hana on anybody. I based Hana on people I knew existed, right? So like he readily admits that this wasn't somebody that he necessarily like pulled into his space to base a character off of, but ultimately he knows that this person exists and he knows the circumstances that they might find themselves in and cares about telling that story in a way that you care about them. So regardless of what, I mean, obviously you want people to refer to people respectfully, but I think Satoshi Kon would if he knew, you know, because I think he cares about this character. I think if he had lived to see the GKIDS dub, I can't imagine he would argue with the spirit behind it. I mean, I don't want to assume too much, but the fact that he cares so much about telling the stories of people that don't get their stories told and seeing and identifying people that others seem to forget or cast aside, I have to imagine that he would be behind sort of people's adoption of this character or interpretation or you know, view of this character and just kind of run with it.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. This sounds so ADHD, me just like shouting all of a sudden. But you saying that just reminded me. Yeah, the fact that he might not have had a lot of experience with like drag queens or like the queer community even, or this, you know, or you know, this type of like person. The fact that, you know, Hana has like a mother, there's like a lot of maternal figures in this, and the fact that he found this like ability to show this other type of family that like takes her in and takes care of her is so beautiful. And it made me also realize that, did you guys say earlier in the dub version that you watched that was this the part where Hana has a flashback of performing and someone calls her a fairy?
We did have some unforgettable nights here, huh?
In this dusty old cantina, I've had my share of sangria. When I try to think of us, my memory slips away. My lover left me in a haze of tequila and senoritas. I drowned my sorrows in cerveza. When people looked, they used to say, "This is my favorite soup! You're good for nothing. Shut up! You're good for nothing. You're the one who's good for nothing. For another one or two or three. For love. Sexual fairy! Old I'll take, but no one calls me a fairy!
So actually the F slur wasn't dropped here. I remember this specifically because what I loved about it was that it wasn't a specifically like queer slur that someone shouted that made Hana mad. She was mad because someone called her a fart. And
like an old fart. They call her old fart. Yeah.
It wasn't even that she was gay or trans. It was like, I don't care if you call me the F slur. Do not call me a fart. Like, I just thought that was genius. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
Like everybody there was so familiar with like what they were watching and consuming and doing. It was more just like, you're old, like get like, and I just, I don't know. I just loved that. I thought it was so endearing.
And I think, honestly, the fact that we're having conversations about like completely different ways to translate these scenes, and yet it still all is like effective, like I think speaks a lot with like the core of this movie works. Like, even if you're tweaking some of the language, it still all comes through. Yeah.
And so much of it is stuff that we don't see in any other movies like this. You know, a lot of people, you know, I think there's an assumption that in Japan, they just like think animation is for everything and everyone in a way that American audiences don't, right? Like in America, it's very common to just be like, oh, animation equals a genre for children. And I think oftentimes people assume that it's just the opposite in Japan. And that's not really true. There are different attitudes and there's definitely more shades But Satoshi Kon still got asked lots of questions about why he used animation for this story, because this story was for adults, as he often describes it and other people often describe it. So he still had to defend frequently using animation, maybe not as hard as an American filmmaker would, but he was often defending using animation here, which I do think speaks to the fact that we just don't see these types of stories, these types of interactions, this type of language, or these types of relationships in animation that would be accessible to kind of anybody.
And not just it being for adults, but I think also that it's not telling a story about like magical monsters or robots or whatever. Like it is just telling a story about just real people who you could find, living on the street like these people are. And just getting to know them. And I do and I do think that like if you're not paying attention to this movie or you just see the log line for it, you just feel like, why don't you just make that live action? Like, why is this an animated movie?
People ask that a whole lot.
Yeah. Which but then if you are paying attention, it's sort of like because there's so many like cartoonish and surreal moments in this movie still sprinkled throughout it. Like the core of it, is a story you could theoretically tell in live action, but it is being animated that for one, like makes it just feel a lot more magical in some cases because they can exaggerate these characters' movements, but also allows them to make some of these little impactful, surreal moments that would not play very well in live action in the same way. The whole climax of the on top of the building and Hana floating down, it just simply would not work in live action. It would look silly and cheesy and stupid in live action, and it is so effective in animation.
Yeah, so much of this movie, I mean, as much as people have pulled from it, a queer family story, a found family story, all these types of like themes that maybe Satoshi Kon wasn't necessarily keeping front of mind or considering at all, according to, his his accounts. There are these big themes he does talk about, which are coincidence and obviously human stories, right? And the coincidence stuff is where he gets to put in his weird little, just a bit of like seasoning of Satoshi Kon weird surreality or magical realism, basically, I guess would be like the current buzzy
Christmas magic, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
The lucky little baby who has a lucky little bowl on her head.
Yeah.
She does.
Yep. Yeah, it really is the type of thing that I think only works the way that it does because of the animation. And there's just certain scenes I think they wouldn't have considered shooting, or that would have been harder to do, or that you couldn't have redone, or done a retake on because of all these coincidences. And it really does just start with so much that I think wouldn't work as well in live action.
The first like most surreal moment that really comes to mind for me that I just like, that just cemented this being like one of my favorite things ever, is the moment that Gin meets the old man in his house and the windmills and how the windmills stop when he dies. And, well, then he fake dies at first and then he wakes back up.
You know something? You remind me of myself when I was younger. I can see it plain as day. May I make one last request? Would you be so kind as to get rid of this? When I'm dead, I don't want anyone to find out. It'll only hurt them.
Okay. I swear, no one will ever know. Wow!
Take care of yourself, will ya? May I just make
another request?
And now, farewell, friend.
It's bizarrely funny. Just like it's a sad sequence.
It's so
but also
sad,
really
and
funny.
it's so brutal, of course, because we just see. I love that it's kind of juxtaposed between this moment right before, where I think it's right before, where Gin just gets the shit kicked out of him, or maybe it's right after that he gets the shit kicked out of him with no context. It's not like, we just see exactly what Combe probably saw, which is, people that just, either see homeless people as, or they don't see them, or they see them as vermin that need to be cleaned up, and people just like kicking the shit out of them, which is so brutalizing and scary, which, yes, could be seen in a live action. But then the second thing that happens right after that, there's no way that would play the same exact way that it does. It almost looked like I told Tommy, I was like, sorry to make a weird, like, Hayao Miyazaki reference right now, but I cannot
he would love it. It's one of his favorite filmmakers.
I could not think of Howl's Moving Castle when Howl is sick in bed and all the shit's just like all over top of him. It was like the same exact imagery of the old man like sitting in his little house with all of his like little pinwheels. Like it was the same exact like picture. Like it was just perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of this movie really does rely on the context of these three folks being unhoused in different circumstances and just the general idea of what homelessness looked like in Tokyo at the time, right? So you have these three characters. We've talked about Hana a little bit, but Hana's whole thing is that she's homeless because of a bunch of circumstances that led her to kind of leave her home because she felt like she couldn't go back to it.
But Hana, if you were having such a hard time, why didn't you come back?
After that embarrassing ordeal, I couldn't bear to show my face.
Oh, don't be silly. A little bit of money took care of that guy. I'm just happy to see you again. It's been too long. Please don't cry. It scares me to death.
Gin, similarly, makes a bunch of decisions that isolate him or distance him from his family that make him feel like he can't go back. Plus, he's very clearly an alcoholic and has a gambling addiction.
When I was little, Mom and I searched everywhere trying to find you. We even went to the morgue to check unidentified bodies. By the way, that man you owed money to was shot and almost killed the other day. It's been all over the news. Did you see it?
He's gonna live? That's great. I'm glad.
I thought you'd say that.
Those deaths were my fault. I ran him up. He had nothing to do with it.
And then Miyuki
oh my God.
Left home because and feels like she can't go home because she stabbed her police officer dad. So like all of them have
because
these...
because he basically was
Understandably
responsible for losing her cat.
Yeah.
Real. I would you know what? She did nothing wrong. She did nothing wrong.
Es mi padre. Father, police.
Wait, your dad's a cop? My father's also a policeman. Except, if he ever sees me again, he'll arrest me. Look at this. Isn't she cute? I just found her one day, and those spots on her back look like wings, so I named her Angel. I stabbed my father. I can't go back, ever.
No pasa nada, llora.
Give me less of an excuse to stab a police officer.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Just saying.
Good for her. Exactly. But so much of this movie is like built on the reasons that they are where they are and what they're getting from each other, and then having them move through a world that only really they see the way that they do, right? So their relationships with each other are really, really filling in each other's stories. So Gin left his daughter and wife and is getting some of that from Miyuki and Hana. Miyuki left her parents behind and is getting that from Gin and Hana. Hana's biggest dream is to be a mother, and so is able to do that for Miyuki with Gin.
And
so
she's got a husband too.
Yeah, right, exactly. She gets a husband out of it, but she wouldn't say it,
Yeah.
But that's obviously what they all kind of represent. And then whether they're together or separate, they move through these spaces that they are familiar with and that they are comfortable with, but that only they kind of know. So one of those ends up being this moment where Gin ends up with this essentially older version of himself, which I will have a lot to say about. And I don't know if it's a wild thought or not, so I can't wait to bounce this off of you. But he ends up in situations like that I imagine most folks have not necessarily experienced. You end up in situations where they're like going through trash to find each other gifts, or the movie opens with them basically sitting through this like Christian nativity play in order to get food, and so much of their lives are informed by this stuff, but it's all really like everyday stuff for them.
It is.
Yeah.
And then you layer these coincidences on top of it that add this like weird layer that even they couldn't necessarily expect. So when all this stuff we're not necessarily, or most people wouldn't necessarily be familiar with, they still get to add this layer of, oh, well, nobody would be used to an ambulance crashing in the restaurant right after you stepped out of it, you know?
Right.
I do love that every time a car crashes in this movie, someone just walks away from it. Like,
It's very funny.
Every single time I'm expecting like a brutal death, and then just someone just walks straight out of a car.
Yeah.
Truly, considering like the action sequences that are in this movie and how many cars crash, the body count is very low.
Yes.
Does anyone but the old man die in this whole movie?
I don't think so.
And,
I don't think so.
Having seen Perfect Blue, I was wondering if there was going to be a dark moment like this. Like, for example, when it's not even the actual mother of the baby we come to discover, but the woman who lost a child who almost commits suicide.
I've done something so horrible it can't be undone. I should throw myself in this river. I'll step out of my shoes, climb onto the handrail, and for once feel like I'm at peace. Then, looking in the water, I'll see this baby's face staring back. Oh, but I could never end my life looking into this child's face. I won't do it. Hey, no! Wait! No, stop! No, you can't! No,
Let me go!
Life ahead of you.
Let me die! Let me die!
It got really dark for a moment there, and I was starting to have like Perfect Blue thoughts again, and yet somehow it was still pulled back. You know, and I got worried about Hana when she fell off the building. I was like, oh my god.
Or when she's coughing up blood earlier.
Right.
Yes, I was like, is this going to be what we're gonna get? I don't want this to happen, but I'm honestly just so relieved that it didn't go that way.
Yeah. Well, somehow he manages, somehow being he's very skillful, but like manages to make this movie balance these really dark moments with these really funny moments that aren't like big, huge laugh out loud haha moments, but that are like cheeky. You know what I mean? So like in that moment where that woman's about to jump off of the bridge, Hana and Miyuki are talking basically about exactly that. And Hana is like in an over sort of dramatic, exaggerated way talking about because of what she's done, she's going to do this thing. And then passes somebody doing exactly that thing. And then
the timing of it, it's like so dark, but it is so funny. Just seeing the lady get up on the railing to jump as they're just casually walking by, and then the double wait, hold on.
Right. And so they still like in that moment do the same sort of like stop and turn thing that they do for other moments that are less dark. And so there's this kind of consistency of language and humor throughout that prevents anything from being too dark, which is why I still feel like that was one of the things I thought about, because this is kind of an odd movie for us to be talking about because it isn't explicitly aimed at children or explicitly aimed at families. So I thought about those things, and I still think because of the humor and the tone, and because nobody ends up really, aside from Gin, really, really like brutalized in any sort of way, in the way that you might expect from Perfect Blue, I still think it all balances out in such a way that most kids could still watch it and not necessarily feel like particularly scarred by it,
Yeah, and even even the moments of violence, like the violence that they have against Gin, like it's violent in the moment, but then he's like totally fine after that, and just like riding bikes and doing his little Scooby-Doo communication with people and stuff like that, and having his hilarious comedic moments. Like he's fine right after it. Like the movie plays the drama when it needs to play the drama, but I think it also recognizes it is still animated, so it can get away with a little bit of just like fantasy, like cartoon logic for things, and it is still ultimately meant to be uplifting. So it's like, we'll give you the drama, you will process it, and then we will move on to something funny. And it doesn't, and Code is skillful enough that it doesn't feel like whiplash.
There's also that perfect, that's like both of you just said it. There's that perfect moment where, Gin he's beat up by the kids, and then he gets kind of left in the alleyway, and he sees an angel, and then you realize that it's a drag queen or someone from like the performer. And at first I even was like, was that person real? And then they don't even know, you just see her in the background in the same outfit. And I was like, oh my God, that was so perfect.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's so funny too. There's so many like little dry moments of humor too. All three of the characters have like very different versions of humor. Like Hana is very over the top and oftentimes has the most sort of cartoonish reactions to things. or the sort of most exaggerated reaction to things. I love Gin's humor. It is all so dry and tired. One of my favorite moments in this whole movie is when he goes to the police station and says, I have some trash to take out.
Can I help you? I have some trash to get rid of. I don't think I'm gonna fit.
It's so good.
Like, I love you so much. I care you so much. You know,
So good. So good.
Beautiful, wonderful man. Perfect human.
Truly.
I mean, not far from perfect, but also perfect human.
Yeah. So much of it is just like so funny. One thing, okay, this is what I want to bounce off of you, because it is a Christmas movie and there are so many weird coincidence things. There is this kind of magical realism element. I mean, ostensibly this is kind of like Hannah's story, because it kind of follows her journey with this child and sort of her initial reaction to it, and then kind of getting to the point where she's taking care of it with a complication along the way. Sure. But what's interesting to me is that Gin kind of has like a weird mini like Christmas Carol journey through this, where like Gin kind of meets himself in the past and the future, and is sort of presented with himself ish in the present. So like he first meets his sort of like ghost of Christmas future or whatever in the old man who's also an alcoholic, also gambling addict, who is basically at the point in his life where he's sort of like, all I could really hope for is to die like inside and with a drink. You know what I mean? Which is like a very sobering thing, I think, for Gin, who, by the way, is like 41 years old. Like, Gin is not particularly old.
Yeah, that's pretty
I think
wild.
it's like a really sobering thing for him to realize, and I do think he like takes it with him. Plus, that is where he gets the shit kicked out of him, which is also like a in whatever way, a pretty eye-opening moment in some way, shape, or form.
And this is kind of after he's in some ways like betrayed his family by just being like, sorry, we lost him. We're not going after him. We lost the baby. We lost Miyaki, whatever. Who cares?
We're not action heroes.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. So he meets his sort of ghost of Christmas future or whatever. But then,
or is that also Santa Claus? Because
could be, you know, Santa Claus is always real in Christmas movies, right? He also ends up meeting his sort of like ghost of Christmas past, because the baby that they find that is ultimately kidnapped by this woman connected to this guy who is that woman's ex, who is a younger man also addicted to gambling, and is sort of convinced that like, if I can just get this one win, or if I can just get the right ticket, which is exactly what Gin was going through with the races, then his life will be fine. And I want to point out that like that guy tells Gin, who at this point in the movie is like giving this younger dude advice, like, dude, get it together. That guy's like, yeah, but I just won. And what he won was like $600. Like, he won 100,000 yen, which is not life-changing money for most people, you know?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Where I think it's a little bit unclear is like what his ghost of Christmas present would be. I think there's a few things it could be. Because I'm not sure entirely what it would be. I don't know if it is him sort of confronting the doctor with his daughter and sort of seeing a different version of what that could look like. I don't know if it in some way relates to the doctor having basically the exact story that Gin has been lying with to people. So Gin has been telling people that his daughter and his wife died, and that's the doctor's exact story. I don't know if it relates to Miyuki herself, in that he now has this sort of like new family that involves this daughter and this wife that he otherwise had left behind. And so this is kind of a new version of, I'm not sure where the present thing is.
Well, the traditional Ghost of Christmas Present story, like with Scrooge, is that it's like about the people
right. He's like
Scrooge
watching.
has affected.
Yeah.
Like he's literally watching what's going on. So I think that's, so like, it's not necessarily that he would be seeing a shadow of himself. So I think that like any of the scenarios I think kind of work. Like I think all of these things, I think that, and also when he's at the sort of like wedding thing, wedding scene earlier, because he ends up encountering the guy who basically inflicted all the gambling debts on him, and then basically kind of ends up in that over the process of it learns to forgive him, where it's just sort of like, you know what, like I owed him money, but it's my fault for owing him money in the first place. Like I did the gambling to owe him money. Like, and that kind of was a big part of his resolution. So that might be really the Christmas present thing.
That makes sense because it's the transformative moment more than any of the other ones.
Right. But there are a lot of like, for him, more than any other character, like he sees shadows of himself throughout the movie and many characters in a way that's really interesting that I think is ultimate. I mean, so much of this movie for them is sort of like, you know, on like there's just a lot of complexity beneath the surface for all these characters. And I think Miyuki and Hana have sort of different tracks that they go down for that. But with him, it's really a lot more for him about self-reflection than it is for the two of them because he is so just, you know, weighted down by his past mistakes specifically and the self-loathing from that and figure out how to sort of move on from that. So it sort of makes sense that he's the one going through like the Scrooge story essentially.
Yeah.
I agree. I love that. I think you're spot on. I think it doesn't have to be like a specific depiction of it. I think it's just like the homage to a very well-known Christmas story that just makes it kind of fit perfectly. Right.
Well, there's so much coincidence in this movie, and a lot of it is for the sake of coincidence, like from Cohn's own perspective. Like it is a movie about coincidence. So in so many other movies where you would call all these things like weird contrivances to move things along, he's saying, no, that is the story. It is about these weird coincidences that are beyond reality, you know?
Yeah. Again, I think it's the Christmas magic, you know? It's like what if magic on Christmas allows these people to kind of like find a lot of peace in their lives that they didn't have before previously.
Yeah.
Well, and it is interesting because all of them, I mean, they are this family unit, but all of their circumstances in some way, shape, or form kind of rely on either a misinterpretation or a mishandling or a miscommunication regarding some family situation of their own. And by the end of the movie, they all, to some extent, find some sort of peace with that, even though we don't see what the actual next step is with them, right? So Gin ends up meeting his daughter in that hospital. We don't know what happens with that. We also know that he ends up inheriting essentially the winning lottery ticket from the old man who died, but we have no idea if he ever notices it or what he does with it. Hana ends up finding, you know, her mother within that entertainment space and her family within that entertainment space and finds out, oh, I could have come back here this whole time. She explicitly said so. So there's that. We don't know if she necessarily will, but she can. And then Miyuki ends up running into her dad a couple times before the movie sort of ends with them finally actually making contact with each other. But hers is the one that we get sort of like the least amount to work with because they see each other, but we don't really know what the interaction is. We don't know necessarily what that resolution looks like if there is one. But it is interesting that they all kind of have their separate family journeys supported by their current family journey, all surrounding this little like baby family journey, you know?
Yeah. And I think Hana, what makes her so instrumental to all of this is, you know, obviously she's the driving factor initially of being like, no, we have to take care of this baby. But I think that also it leads as part of her resolution too, is that it's like, this kind of proves that to her that like, she could be a good mother. Like she was able to protect this baby and get it back home. If it was her own baby, she would be able to take care of it, even in like the wild circumstances that she is in throughout this movie. Yeah. So I think that is also an important part for her too.
Well, and how cool for this movie to show this trans woman, especially at a time where this wouldn't have been viewed this way, being this successfully like motherly figure, making mistakes like any mom would, but like effectively successfully being this mom character and this caring character and this super maternal figure for this baby until it can be reunited with its actual parents. I mean, that's a really cool fucking thing this movie does. And I know Satoshi Kon will say over and over that he doesn't set out to like make large commentary on these things. He just looks to tell people stories. But that's what he's doing, is he's telling these stories everybody gets to see, and they get to see a different perspective, or they see somebody in a role they never expected. And in Hana's case, it's like, God, how many times do you see that? It's so, in 2025, it's so rare to get to see that.
So beautiful. And also, though, shout out to the one woman who's like in the gang who just like takes the other baby in for a moment and like feeds it, and that was such a beautiful, just like little moment. I I bring it back up though too, also because we all watched it with different like language stuff.
Yeah.
So in my version, that the other gang was speaking Spanish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when Miyuki went to talk to them, she would speak in English. She would try to say things in English, and they would connect over English words.
Fascinating.
Oh my God.
Because they
That's
were
so
speaking
smart.
two totally different languages. And it was really cute. Like I can't
so
remember
cool.
like
That
when
makes
she
sense.
first gets kidnapped by him, she just says like thank you. Like she doesn't know what to say. Like she's like thank you for not killing me. And like I just like there's a few different times in which they are trying to speak the same language, but they both kind of come together like speaking English. And obviously like we're talking about different like parental roles and how anyone, despite what gender they are, can take on any role that is, you know, stereotypically paternal or maternal or vice versa. Like it doesn't matter really who you are in that scenario because anyone can be that. And it's just the essence of what it means. And so the fact that they're saying like mother and father in a language that neither of them is their original language, I think is just kind of interesting, like kind of represents that in some way.
Yeah. I think I think that's a really great observation. And I think also like that the whole thing with like that gang, it is like it's a gang, right? Like I think that's essentially what it is.
The Yakuza, yeah.
Because the one guy's missing a finger, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. But with them, I mean, it still plays into what this whole premise of the movie is, where it's sort of like these people that I think have these very specific stereotypes in society, and you're supposed to either ignore or immediately assume are just bad to their core, right? Whether that's unhoused people, whether that's queer people, in this case, whether that's like gang members, and yet like a gang member who just like was out to assassinate a guy sees a baby and is like, got to take care of this baby. Hey,
well, it's like
he's literally screaming leche the whole time.
Right.
He's literally like, I have to get this baby some milk.
Like every single person in this movie like has humanity at their core, you know, and can connect with that level of empathy, you know?
Well, and it's presented in so many ways. Like the Yakuza guy is in this circumstance because he's on his way to a wedding and was visiting a cemetery to speak with his ancestors about it. And so they intersect with him over this sort of family thing, which is another coincidence. And then the person who goes to assassinate him, I think there's even a news story talking about how these are immigrants to Japan and all these sorts of questions about that, presents these people that would be on the outskirts of Japanese society as caring about family and being willing to step in, you know, in this familial role. I mean, every interaction...
Like, immigrants also have so many stereotypes,
right,
you know, leveled against them at any given time.
Right. And every sort of cross-cultural or subcultural communication that happens really does happen around this idea that, like, you have someone that is your family, you know, whether it is, like you were saying, Cass, like maternal, paternal, or something completely different, but like everybody's able to relate over that in some way, shape, or form. And that's kind of where everything kind of overlaps, which is a really cool thing to sort of have throughout this with all these really wildly different characters that serve wildly different roles. You know, like they serve primary roles way before they serve that particular role. But when you get down to it, that's how they end up intersecting.
Yeah.
And talking about family, very queer thing as well. So
chosen family for sure. And that's the whole point
yeah.
of it, is like that is what the core of family is over anything else. It is not even just like family people you choose or whatever, or friends or the family you choose, but it's more like, no, that core unit of just like bonding with someone and feeling. I don't know if Hana says it, but there's maybe I just heard it somewhere else. I think maybe I did. I think it was something else I was watching, but it's like there's something about a baby that like, or having a child, especially I've heard this from people who have children, something just changes innately in your body that like you will do anything to keep that thing alive. Like you just, it doesn't, like you just have an completely world-changing perspective on your own identity in person when you have to do that. Like,
well, and
sure,
all
and that's what they
three
do.
of our protagonists go through that process without giving birth to this child. We see
Yeah.
every single one of the three of them take care of the kid at some point. Gin is the one that I think people would immediately sort of be like, well, did he? But yes, there's a really beautiful moment. The first moment where Gin sort of is convinced that, like, yeah, we should take care of this baby and stop sort of pouting and being stubborn about it is when he hears the baby crying and realizes that it's hungry. Like, and Gin is the
That
one who has
motherfucker
had a
protects
child.
the baby from a car crash
Yeah.
and tumbles it out
Yeah.
like a fucking badass. Like,
Yeah.
that dude has a full ass transformation.
Right. Well, he is the one of the three of them that has had like a child to take care of in the past also. It's like he's the one who's able to draw upon experience. And so all of them at some point, you know, Miyuki included, end up doing something to like keep this baby alive kind of at their own expense.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they all get to be badasses at one point or another, all for the purposes of protecting this baby.
Because this baby does not give a fuck. Like, this baby does not care who is taking care of it. It just it can't talk. It can't express any sort of emotion. It just has to survive. And it's like everyone seems to there's just something universally understood about that.
Yeah. Except for the part where it does talk very briefly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Every single time I forgot that happened. That is such a Pikachu-ass
I
moment.
made that up.
It truly, like, every single time I forget because
I
it's so
love it.
wild. It's so wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so good.
Another thing I think is that I find really interesting about this movie relating to Hana specifically is like Hana is like religious technically, like she does seem to believe in God like explicitly, and I think it's fascinating for a few reasons. For one, because, you know, this is a Christmas movie, but Christmas in Japan isn't really the same as Christmas in America.
No.
Like there isn't a huge Christian population in Japan, so Christmas is a very secular holiday for them typically.
And isn't there a huge Japanese holiday like right after it that would be more significant for people?
Yeah, right. So like Christmas is a very secular sort of celebration. So for Hana to, I think, have any element of like religious faith at all is just sort of interesting, inherently anyway. And I do think there's something really beautiful about like this trans person, you know, a queer people famously treated pretty badly by Christianity a lot of the times, who then, you know, I think that a big part of that sort of end sequence where, you know, she falls off of the building with the baby and then a magical wind basically like helps lift her off the ground and then slowly land her. I think it's kind of like for her, it's sort of proof that like God is real and God loves me.
She's been saying it the whole movie.
She's saying the whole movie. It's sort of like, yeah, I was right. God loves me clearly and saved me. But I think there's also a secular take on it where like, if you aren't religious, I think you can also just read it as saying like, I am queer and I deserve love, period. Not just from God, but I am queer. Being a queer, I still deserve love, period. And I think that's a really great takeaway from this, that like, you know, and I think Hana's so interesting because I think she knows that the whole time. I don't think she's never like,
there was no doubt.
No.
She's never self-loathing about being a queer person at all.
Yeah.
Like that's never her issue. And so to see a movie with a character like that, who was always like, yeah, this is who I am. I y'all can have a problem with it or not, but I love myself. And then getting validation to the end that it's sort of like, and the universe / God, however you want to take it, loves me too, because I deserve it. Like it's so validating to see that. And like, that's like, it's such an important like piece of the movie, you know?
It's just like the nativity scene. Like God gave me this baby. What are you going to do about it? Like, it's so important, actually. There's an additional part to that, I think, that she says something. They start, this is right before they find the baby. And she says, like, maybe God, maybe I can have a baby. Who knows? Like, maybe, who knows what will happen?
Mary.
Joy to the world. The food has come.
It's the Lord has come, you know that. That's a shame food can't fill an empty head.
I got more knocking around in my head than a homo with no balls.
No, sweetie, God gave me a pair of those by mistake. Oh, but I know in my heart I'm more woman than anyone.
Except women can have babies.
If the Virgin Mary got pregnant, that same miracle might happen to someone like me and land a baby right here. You never know. Oh, is that all there is, sweetheart? Could you make mine a double? I am eating for two, you know. It's Christmas.
Exactly. So, and then, it's so good. Then she has the baby. Like, that's God
That's
gave her
such a
that
good
damn
point.
baby. And then that old lady who saw her a few moments, like, 'cause she's like talking out loud, but she's like going up to the front of the line to get food, and the lady that's standing there is like, what the hell's happening?
Yeah.
What is this person talking about? And then that woman sees her later with the baby, and she's like, she did have a baby. I don't know if that was in your version either, but it was amazing.
That is a very that joke is so funny.
It's
Yeah,
perfect.
it's so good. Because she specifically says, I'm eating for two, which is very
Yes. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're right, Derek. She is so confident in who she is throughout the whole movie, and anything that she kind of goes through that's tough or a struggle, like that she has has an actual hard time with, relates in no way to her being shaken about who she is, you know?
Yeah. I think I think that's so good. And I think, probably for the time too, a bit of a subversion on what you would expect from a story like this. I think a lot of stuff with her, whether Cohen intended for it or not, I think plays like a rug pull in a good way. Cause I think that if you go into this movie blind, and maybe at the beginning you might see Hana and initially are sort of like, oh, she's going to be the over the top queen who's like, going to be the comic relief or whatever. And then you very quickly realize like, no, she's like the heart of the movie and like the main character. And then there's like that. And I think there's also like, I do think that there's a joke later where like I think the lover that she had at one point, I don't know if it was like a boyfriend or a husband or whatever, but like he died, and I think they like somebody asked like, was it A's? And she was like, no, he slipped on a bar, like slipped on a soap bar in the bathtub,
right?
Like, and you have that I think coupled with like she's coughing up blood, like, oh no, is this going to be your typical story of a queer person? And I bet it's an AIDS thing, and she's going to die or whatever. And it's just like, no, it's because she's homeless and like has bad nutrition and just needs to drink more water. Like, it's not like, I feel like they're constantly like looking at a lot of these tropes that you normally play with queer characters that are often like pretty harmful, and like at every turn it's just sort of like, nope, not with her.
Yeah, she's so good. It truly is wild. Like if it's fascinating to think about how much Satoshi Kon got right with her, just out of like having his heart in the right place. It's like truly wild. You know what I mean?
Truly.
But I mean, that speaks to like just treating people like people, I think means you're going to not fuck it up.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So true.
What a novel idea.
I know, right?
Just
unbelievable.
See people the way that they are, and
weird how hard that seems to be.
I
for
know
people, though.
it really is. It really is.
I mean, if nothing else, that's such a good takeaway from this movie, because this movie doesn't exist if Satoshi Kon wasn't seeing people for who they are and wanting other people to see them for who they are. And like, Satoshi Kon isn't the first person to have included queer people in media in Japan, but it wasn't necessarily a deep storied history in popular media by 2003.
No.
I mean, it kind of makes sense that at the point where he's starting his career, the first sort of big mainstream popular queer movies or TV shows or magazines are kind of circulating or coming out in a way that is equivalent, maybe not equivalent to like a Blockbuster, but is like not underground indie secret stuff, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that dissimilar from like the sort of path of queerness in pop culture that like, in Western culture too, to be honest. Like, obviously there's different nuances to it in Japan, and different contexts and everything. But like, I think I feel like probably where America was at in 2003 with queerness,
not too dissimilar
in culture, is pretty similar to where Japan was.
Were we at was this the Hillary Duff "Don't Say Gay" era, or was this a little bit later?
That was a little bit. I think that was closer to 2008. I think that was a little bit later. But this was like Queer Eye for the Straight Guy era, I think. Wasn't it?
For sure it was. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's still, but I think that honestly, I think that's an interesting comparison, because it's just like this movie also doesn't treat Hana like just like, isn't it a fascinating object? Isn't it weird and interesting that she's queer, like in the way that a lot of like even stuff that is important to the history of queer representation, a lot of stuff around this time, if you did have queer characters, even if it was coming from a good place, it would still just be a sort of like, here's your gay best friend, isn't that interesting? Here are the queer eyes here to liven up the straights. Like Hana is like such a just clear, just character in a movie, period. And queerness is an important part of her identity. But it doesn't feel like Cohen specifically was sort of like, I'm going to have the first queer character in X or whatever. Like it was just sort of like it just made sense to him to have this character, especially if you're having a movie about, for one, homeless people, of which a lot of queer people are homeless. Like there's a huge portion of that population, especially trans people. But also like if it's a movie about people that are often misunderstood in society or, viewed as enemies or invisible and whatnot, like having a queer and or trans person in a story just makes sense. Like, it just makes sense,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say that one thing that I am really sad about is that we never get to see the kitty cat at the end.
Yeah, because Miyuki's story just kind of like is the last beat and doesn't really conclude.
I also
all that
am
much.
just really still like in awe that she fucking stabbed her dad in the stomach because like that was a very big swing. Like even I feel like for him that was a big swing. It wasn't like she just like ran away because she was upset, which is what I assumed had happened, right?
Right.
But then you come to find out, and also like when we're told about Hana and Gin's story, we hear the wrong story first, right? We both we hear things that they both kind of like fudged a little bit, right? Mostly Gin. And then when Miyuki comes on the, and she talks about it, I thought maybe when she said that she stabbed her dad, it was like an over exaggeration, but then it was like, no, she stabbed her dad in the stomach. Like it was very shocking.
Yeah. And like the dream sequence that she has when you see that, like, that was one of the various like Satoshi Kon.
I was gonna say that's the most
things.
Satoshi Kon sort of traditional things in this movie.
Yeah. But we don't see Angel the cat, but we do see the fucking really funny joke where they're like hiding out and Gin's like, I wonder if cat meat's any good.
Oh my God.
Have you ever wondered if cat meat's any good?
Try anything and I'll end you!
Just a joke. Calm down.
Yes.
So funny. It's such a big take. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. This reminds me of something that I thought was also really funny because the way that she finds out that the cat might be back is like an ad that was placed in a paper, but that paper she finds at that house that was like burned down or whatever. This is another obsessed with Gin moment where I love the fact that he takes the key and unlocks the door and walks through it and says, I'm home.
That was the best.
Fucking funny. He's so funny.
It was so good. He's like, oh, well, I mean, you got to try the key to the door. Is it the right house? Yep.
It's smart. It makes sense.
I also the dry humor is so fucking funny.
Truly. I also love the like gossipy aunties in that scene. That cracked me up. Every time they added two more, I was like laughing so much harder.
Also, shout out, in the ruins of the house, there were movies and there was a VHS of Star Wars.
There sure was.
Yes, clearly like taped off a TV because it's like handwritten on there. I love that.
So I got so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, this was made for me. There's even a Star Wars cameo somehow in this random movie.
Yeah, you got cats like stabbing police officers.
Everything I need.
Cats. You got Star Wars. You got everything you need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Best Christmas movie ever. It's gonna be in my rotation now. This and the holiday special are gonna be the two things I watch every year.
Good. It's worth it, I think. Yeah, totally. The only thing that I had was just animation touches.
Oh yes.
But specifically like justifying this being an animation, which I don't need to do, but like we already named, like the baby talking in the dream sequence, but there's like little details that I hadn't noticed until watching it this time, where it's like for example, when Hana is just like imitating the taxi driver that she's like pretending that she's gonna marry or whatever, her face turns into him when she's imitating him.
I had to like jump back to see if I saw that correctly. And
then like such a weird little detail, but when they're in the hospital and paying and like, Gin's like, this was like the money I was going to give to Kyoko, like the yen has a sad face on it. And then later when he realizes that that's his daughter, Kyoko, they show the yen again and it has a smiley face on it.
I did not notice that. That's incredible.
Cause it's like for a half second. It's so funny. It's
oh
so
my
funny.
God. That's so good. That's why it makes it such like that's one great thing about anime in some ways, is that like it is so distinct from American animation, and yet it is so much more realistic somehow. There is just a magic to it that just makes it feel more realistic, even though sometimes it's more over the top. And yet when stuff like this happens, it really makes it feel like a hallucination, because you're truly like, did that actually happen? And you're like, well, it's animated, so they can do whatever they want. But like, you still don't believe whether you actually saw it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's like, it's big, but it's always evoking like feelings that are real. And I think that's what makes it feel so authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, the money frowning and smiling, like that's obviously not a real thing that really happens, but like, that's how it feels in that moment. Like, I mean, it's a simple example, but it's like, they feel sad and then they feel happy. And it's just like putting that on display in a way that you can't do when you're being hyper realistic about something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that this movie was like very intentionally meant to be the most grounded movie that he had made to that point and ever made. But it's also the movie, at least from the ones that I've seen, that push expression into a realm that you would expect from comedy anime to push them. So like, you see like when Gin and Miyuki are arguing, they end up with like the shark teeth, because they're like mad at each other or whatever. And like the expressions that end up getting pushed, or the fucking shit-eating grin on Miyuki's face when she says like, oh, you do care about him, or you do love him, or whatever the fuck she says when she's poking fun of Hana. Oh, aren't you like in love with him or something? And then she like has this shit-eating grin on her face. Like, there's so many expressions that, even the sort of supervising animator, I think, has talked about this, where he was like, when I was presented with like the vision for what the animation was going to be, I was like really caught off guard, because the expressions were so like cartoony and over the top. But that's one of the things I love about this movie so much. The weird like when Hana is like laying into Gin in the hospital, all of her expressions, all of her faces are so funny and bizarre and over the top, and like the impact is just that much bigger because they're willing to allow this otherwise like grounded or lightly fantastical movie also be kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
Love Gin's failed Akira slide so much.
Such a good joke. Oh my god.
I mean,
So
I love it when it's successful in anything. I also love it when they fuck it up real hard in anything. He eats it so bad.
I also love when the Yakuza boss, you think he's doing something really badass, like, how he's out there getting hurt, but then he gets rolled over. The car gets rolled over him because the lady's dog like pushed the car.
And she fell like face first into the car.
Oh my god. It was just like,
yeah.
That's how you ended up run over by your car? Cool,
just
man.
Perfect. Yeah.
Oh, so funny.
Beautiful.
So good. I just love Hana making haikus throughout the movie. I think it was really fun.
Yeah. Did you happen to write them down? I meant to do that and I never did.
I did not.
They're so fun.
They were lovely. Yeah.
And it's
They're
not
really
overutilized. I think it's used exactly 3 times.
Yes.
And in some ways it's like a running gag, but it's not really a gag. They're like actually beautiful, and they only kind of happen in moments where it makes a lot of sense. And they cut to usually like a wider shot, or a quieter moment or something when she's doing it. And it's really, really lovely.
Yeah. I also think it's great that she sings Sound of Music.
Oh, yes.
And that Miyuki doesn't know what it is.
Every mountain.
I think it makes it even better, too, especially in the Japanese version.
Yeah.
Like her singing in English, and everyone's just like, what is going on?
Yeah. This is totally like not unrelated to the movie, but unrelated to the story. Love the opening credits so much. Love how they're presented. They're so cool. I think this is also, I kept forgetting to actually look for it, but I think in the opening credits is where you pass posters for Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and I think also maybe Tokyo Godfathers. I think there's like a poster for this movie in this movie or something like that.
I think you're
which is
right.
wild.
Yeah.
So little fun things like that.
Perfect.
Crack me up. Also, the closing credits are amazing, where buildings just start dancing to...
The dancing buildings? So good.
Yeah, to Ode to Joy or whatever that's called. So good. We didn't talk very much about the music in this, but the music is like not at all what I would have expected. It ends up being like a lot more playful than I would expect given the circumstances. But I guess it's kind of the whole vibe of the movie, right? Like this balance of darkness and sort of lightness. But there's in particular, the song that plays while they're like journeying. Like on the train and walking through the city and all that sort of stuff. And there's no dialogue. It's just the song playing and just them going from place to place is like so pleasant to listen to. And it's not at all what I would have expected for that sequence because I'm so fucking like American score pilled that like it's just so different than anything I would expect.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And the last thing I have is like the last part of the movie, but just like, you know, they do, I think, have a really nice capper with the real parents of the baby. Who find it and they're like, I don't like, they're trying to meet the people who rescued their child.
I don't want to intrude.
No, it's fine. It's just, I'm told they're homeless.
We don't care.
We want to ask them if they'll be her godfathers.
Oh,
come in.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so good.
Nice. Yeah.
So good.
That's another, like, you know, the stigma of homelessness and the stereotypes, not only of queer stereotypes that are subverted, but there's that moment where they're on the bus and they're like, oh, like the homeless people smell, but it's not actually them. The baby just like shit itself. So that's why it smells bad. It was like kind of assuming that kind of thing happened. But
yeah, there are a lot of moments that sort of like explicitly sort of interrogate people's reactions to them. The drunk guy in the restaurant who's only different because he is housed and they're unhoused, but he's like
so obnoxious,
and terrible to them.
And yet they're the ones being kicked out because they're just sitting there quietly, and yet that guy is allowed to just like run around because he has money, like
harass people.
Yeah.
I mean, in a funny way, it's like, you know, Satoshi Kon's so good at the blending of you know, fact and fiction and reality and whatnot, and like this is sort of a version of that, right? Where it's just like the world that you see and the assumptions you make like aren't necessarily true, and this movie is showing you like a version of reality people see and then showing you the version of reality that is actually real, that these people are living and experiencing, and how completely different those things at every turn always are from what you're expecting and seeing, right? Like it is still, he ultimately is still bending reality as much as he does in Paprika and Millennium Actress and Perfect Blue, just like in a different, more realistic way.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Well, I think we could talk about this probably forever, especially given his other movies. Yeah, you definitely
I'm gonna watch it on the plane.
Definitely watch like the dub too. I would love for you to hear Hana's actor and characterization because the actress is like incredible. You know, I'm gonna end up watching the rest of the stuff. I've got all of it in my apartment now. I just gotta throw it on. So
I can't wait.
Yeah, so good. Thank you so much, Cass, for joining us, watching this movie with us, talking about this movie with us. It was such a good time. If people want to find more of what you're talking about and the things that you're making, where can they do that?
Thank you guys. I'm just so appreciative that I got to have a reason to watch this movie finally, and have discovered it through you guys. So one of my favorite movies of all time now.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I have a podcast with my partner called Distant Echoes. It's a Star Wars podcast. We watch Star Wars media in any order we like, and that is Distant Echoes Pod on Blue Sky and Distant Echoes SW on Instagram, and I am Gonk Binary on what am I on now? I think I'm just on Blue Sky and Instagram too.
Beautiful. Well, if you want to find me and Derek to talk to us about Satoshi Kon stuff, one, we would love that. But two, you can start with our Patreon at patreon.com/wallopingwebsnappers. Also, check out our Discord. There is a link in the show notes. That Patreon and that Discord are both called Walloping Websnappers, which is the weekly show Derek and I do together, but it supports everything we make together. Derek, where can people find you and the stuff that you are making?
Yeah, you can find me most places at Derek B. Gale. My other podcasts I have going on, I've got Screonk, which I do with Doug, which is a Godzilla movie marathon where we're going through Godzilla's filmography. That's also supported by Walloping Web Snappers Patreon as well. And I also have Gimmicks, where we look at high concept television episodes. I have Lee Carvalho's Potting Challenge, where we're looking at Simpsons tie-in video games, as well as pop culture history and Simpsons history. I do that with Cass's partner Tommy as well, just FYI. But yeah, all of those are part of Glitterjaw.
Nice. You can find me all over the place at Ikkybooley, ICKYBOOLEY. You can listen to me on another show called Novel Gaming, where my friend Katie and I catch up on all the books, video games, and sometimes other media we have been enjoying lately. I referenced it, but you can check out the weekly podcast Derek and I do together called Walloping Web Snappers, which is a deep dive into every Spider-Man cartoon ever made. You can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. And Derek mentioned the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective. You can check that out at glitterjaw.com. That includes that Screonk podcast Derek and I do together. And our episode on Son of Godzilla is out right now if you want to check that out. You can visit us on our website at wallopingwebsnappers.com for a full archive of everything Derek and I do together, including episodes of this very show. You can also follow Falling with Style on Blue Sky at Glitterjaw and Instagram at GlitterjawPods, or email us at pixarpodcast@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe on all podcast platforms. And we will be back in a couple weeks with another one of these special presentation episodes on Power Rangers Dino Fury and Cosmic Fury, which we are so fucking excited to talk about. So we hope you will join us for that.
So excited.
See you then.
See you then.